Tales from Childhood, written by Roald Dahl, Part 3. My four friends and I had come across a loose floorboard at the back of the classroom, and when we priced it up with the blade of a pocket knife, we discovered a big hollow space underneath. This, we decided, would be our secret hiding place for sweets and other small treasures such as conkers and monkey nuts and birds' eggs. Every afternoon, when the last lesson was over, the five of us would wait until the classroom had emptied. Then we would lift up the floorboard and examine our secret hoard, perhaps adding to it or taking something away. One day, when we lifted it up, we found a dead mouse lying among our treasures. It was an exciting discovery. Thwaitis took it out by its tail and waved it in front of our faces. What shall we do with it? He cried. It stinks, someone shouted. Throw it out of the window, quick. Hold on a tick, I said. Don't throw it away. Thwaitis hesitated. They all looked at me. When writing about oneself, one must strive to be truthful. Truth is more important than modesty. I must tell you, therefore, that it was I and I alone who had the idea for the great and daring mouse plot. We all have our moments of brilliance and glory, and this was mine. Why don't we, I said, slip it into one of Mrs. Pratchett's jars of sweets? Then, when she puts her dirty hand in to grab a handful, she will grab a stinky dead mouse instead. The other four stared at me in wonder. Then, as the sheer genius of the plot began to sink in, they all started grinning. They slapped me on my back. They cheered me and danced around the classroom. We will do it today, they cried. We will do it on the way home. You had the idea, they said to me, so you can be the one to put the mouse in the jar. Thwaitis handed me the mouse. I put it into my trouser pocket. Then the five of us left the school, crossed the village green, and headed for the sweet shop. We were tremendously jazzed up. We felt like a gang of desperados setting out to rob a train or blow up the police station. Make sure you put it into a jar which is used often, somebody told me. I am putting it in gobstoppers, I said. The gobstoppers jar is never behind the counter. I have got a penny, Thwaitis said. So I will ask for one sharbat sucker and one bootlace. And while she turns away to get them, you slip the mouse in quickly with the gobstoppers. Thus, everything was arranged. We were strutting a little as we entered the shop. We were the victors now, and Mrs. Pratchett was the victim. She stood behind the counter, and her small, malignant pig eyes watched us suspiciously as we came forward. One sherbet sucker, please, Thoughtis said to her, holding out his penny. I kept to the rear of the group, and when I saw Mrs. Pratchett turn her head away for a couple of seconds to fish a sherbet sucker out of the box, I lifted the heavy glass lid of the gobstopper's jar and dropped the mouse in. Then I replaced the lid as silently as possible. My heart was thumping like mad, and my hands had gone all sweaty. And one bootless, please, I heard Thoughtis saying. When I turned around, I saw Mrs. Pratchett holding out the bootlace in her filthy fingers. I don't want all the lot of you trooping in. Here, if only one of you is buying, she screamed at us. Now, beat it. Go on, get out. As soon as we were outside, we broke into a run. Did you do it? They shouted at me. Of course I did, I said. Well done, you, they cried. What a super show. I felt like a hero. I was a hero. It was marvelous to be so popular. The flush of triumph over the dead mouse was carried forward to the next morning as we all met again to walk to school. Let us go in and see if it is still in the jar, somebody said as we approached the sweet shop. Don't, Thoughtis said firmly. It is too dangerous. Walk past as though nothing has happened. As we came level with the shop, we saw a cardboard notice hanging on the door. Closed. We stopped and stared. We had never known the sweet shop to be closed at this time in the morning, even on Sundays. What has happened? We asked each other. What is going on? We pressed our faces against the window and looked inside. Mrs. Pratchett was nowhere to be seen. Look, I cried. The gobstopper jar has gone. It is not on the shelf. There is a gap where it used to be. It is on the floor, someone said. It has smashed to bits and there is gobstoppers everywhere. There is the mouse, someone else shouted. We could see it all. The huge glass jar smashed to smithereens with the dead mouse lying in the wreckage and hundreds of many colored gobstoppers littering the floor. She got such a shock when she grabbed hold of the mouse that she dropped everything, somebody was saying. But why didn't she sweep it all up and open the shop? I asked. Nobody answered me. We turned away and walked towards the school. All of a sudden, we had begun to feel slightly uncomfortable. There was something not quite right about the shop being closed. Even Thwaitis was unable to offer a reasonable explanation. We became silent. There was a faint scent of danger in the air now. Each one of us had caught a whiff of it. Alarm bells were beginning to ring faintly in our ears. After a while, Thwaitis broke the silence. She must have got one heck of a shock, he said. He paused. We all looked at him, wondering what wisdom the great medical authority was going to come out with next. After all, he went on, to catch hold of a dead mouse when you are expecting to catch hold of a gobstopper must be a pretty frightening experience. Don't you agree? Nobody answered him. Well, now, Thoughtis went on. When an old person like Mrs. Pratchett suddenly gets a very big shock, I suppose you know what happens next. What? We said. What happens? You ask my father, Thoughtis said. He will tell you. You tell us, we said. It gives her a heart attack, Thoughtis announced. Her heart stops beating and she's dead in 5 seconds. For a moment or two, my own heart stopped beating. Thoughtis pointed a finger at me and said darkly, I'm afraid you have killed her. Me? I cried. Why just me? It was your idea, he said. And what is more, you put the mouse in. All of a sudden, I was a murderer. At exactly that point, we heard the school bell ringing in the distance and we had to gallop the rest of the way so as not to be late for prayers. Prayers were held in the assembly hall. We all perched in rows on wooden benches while the teachers sat up on the platform in armchairs facing us. The 5 of us scrambled into our places just as the headmaster marched in, followed by the rest of the staff. The headmaster is the only teacher at Llandaff Cathedral School that I can remember, and for a reason you will soon discover. I can remember him very clearly indeed. His name was Mr. Coombs, and I have a picture in my mind of a giant of a man with a face like a ham and a mass of rusty colored hair that sprouted in a tangle all over the top of his head. All grown ups appear as giants to small children, but headmasters and policemen are the biggest giants of all and acquire a marvelously exaggerated stature. It is possible that Mr. Coombs was a perfectly normal being, but in my memory, he was a giant, a tweed suited giant who always wore a black gown over his tweeds and a waistcoat under his jacket. Mr. Coombs now proceeded to mumble through the same old prayers we had every day, but this morning, when the last Amen had been spoken, he did not turn and led his group rapidly out of the hall as usual. He remained standing before us, and It was clear he had an announcement to make. The whole school is to go out and line up around the playground immediately, he said. Leave your books behind and no talking. Mr. Coombs was looking grim. His hammy pink face had taken on that dangerous scowl which only appeared when he was extremely cross and somebody was for the high jump. He sat there, small and frightened, among the rows and rows of other boys. And to me, at that moment, the headmaster, with his black gown draped over his shoulders, was like a judge at a murder trial. He's after the killer, Thoughtis whispered to me. I began to shiver. I will bet the police are here already, Thoughtis went on. And the Black Maria is waiting outside. As we made our way out to the playground, my whole stomach began to feel as though it was slowly filling up with swirling water. I am only 8 years old, I told myself. No little boy of 8 has ever murdered anyone. It's not possible. Out in the playground, on this warm, cloudy September morning, the deputy headmaster was shouting, Line up in forms. Sixth form over there. Fifth form next to them. Spread out, spread out. Get on with it. Stop talking, all of you. Thoughtis and I and my other 3 friends were in the second form, the lowest but one, and we lined up against the red brick wall of the playground, shoulder to shoulder. I can remember that when every boy in the school was in his place, the line stretched right round the 4 sides of the playground. About 100 small boys altogether, aged between 6 and 12, all of us wearing identical grey shorts and grey blazers and grey stockings and black shoes. Stop talking, shouted the deputy head. I want absolute silence. But why, for heaven's sake, were we in the playground at all? I wondered. And why were we lined up like this? It had never happened before. I half expected to see 2 policemen come bounding out of the school to grab me by the arms and put handcuffs on my wrists. A single door led out from the school onto the playground. Suddenly, it swung open, and through it, like the angel of death, strode Mr. Coombs, huge and bulky in his tweed suit and black gown, and beside him, believe it or not, right beside him, trotted the tiny figure of Mrs. Pratchett herself. Mrs. Pratchett was alive. The relief was tremendous. She's alive, I whispered to Thoughtis standing next to me. I didn't kill her. Thoughtis ignored me. We will start over here, Mr. Coombs was saying to Mrs. Pratchett. He grasped her by one of her skinny arms and led her over to where the sixth form was standing. Then, still keeping hold of her arm, he proceeded to lead her at a brisk walk down the line of boys. It was like someone inspecting the troops. What on earth are they doing? I whispered. Thoughtis didn't answer me. I glanced at him. He had gone rather pale. Too big, I heard Mrs. Pratchett saying. Much too big. It is none of this lot. Let us have a look at some of them titchy ones. Mr. Coombs increased his pace. We would better go all the way round, he said. He seemed in a hurry to get it over with now, and I could see Mrs. Pratchett's skinny goat's legs trotting to keep up with him. They had already inspected one side of the playground where the sixth form and half of the fifth form were standing. We watched them moving down the second side, then the third one. Still too big, I heard Mrs. Pratchett croaking. Much too big. Smaller than these, much smaller. Where is them, nasty little ones? They were coming closer to us now, closer and closer. They were starting on the fourth side. Every boy in our farm was watching Mr. Coombs and Mrs. Pratchett as they came walking down the line towards us. Nasty, cheeky lot, these little uns. I heard Mrs. Pratchett muttering. They come into my shop and they think they can do what they damn well likes. Mr. Coombs made no reply to this. They nick things when I am not looking, she went on. They put their grubby hands all over everything and they have got no manners. I don't mind girls. I never have no trouble with girls. But boys, they are hideous and horrible. I don't have to tell you that, Mr. Headmaster, do I? These are the smaller ones, Mr. Coombs said. I could see Mrs. Pratchett's piggy little eyes staring hard at the face of each boy she passed. Suddenly, she let out a high-pitched yell and pointed a dirty finger straight at Thwaites. That is him, she yelled. That is one of them. I would know him in a mile away. The entire school turned to look at Thwaites. What have done? He stuttered, appealing to Mr. Coombs. Shut up, Mr. Coombs said. Mr. Pratchett's eyes flicked over and settled on my own face. I looked down and studied the black asphalt surface of the playground. Here another of them, I heard her yelling. That one there, she was pointing at me now. You are quite sure? Mr. Coombs said. Of course I am sure, she cried. I never forget a face. Least of all when it is as sly as that. He is one of them, all right. There was 5 altogether. Now, where is them other? The other 3, as I knew very well, were coming up next. Mrs. Pratchett's face was glimmering with venom as her eyes travelled beyond me down the line. There they are, she cried out, stabbing the air with her finger. Him and him and him. That is the 5 of them, all right. We don't need to look no farther than this. Headmaster, they are all here, the nasty, dirty little pigs. You have got their names, have you? I have got their names, Mr. Pratchett. Mr. Coombs told her. I am much obliged to you. And I am much obliged to you, Headmaster, she answered. As Mr. Coombs led her away across the playground, we heard her saying, Right in the jar of gobstoppers it was. A stinking dead mouse which I will never forget as long as I live. You have my deepest sympathy, Mr. Coombs was muttering. Talk about shocks, she went on. When my fingers caught hold of that nasty, soggy, stinking dead mouse, her voice trailed away as Mr. Coombs led her quickly through the door into the school building. Thank you very much.